are in listen-only mode.
Hi, welcome. I wanted to, for those in the room that don't have a parking card, if you could park in a metered lot. If you could park in a metered lot if you don't have a parking ID, I just want to make sure everyone doesn't get a ticket while they're here. Okay, so welcome. Today we are going to talk about the Future Energy Jobs Act, solar updates for Illinois. My name is Jennifer Martin and I'm with ISTC, and I'm here to announce some speakers and some housekeeping rules before we get started. To begin the seminar today, I would ask that everyone in attendance have silence your cell phones. And we'll hold off on questions for each of the speakers until after they're finished, and we'll take maybe a couple online questions, and then at the end of our three speakers' presentations, we'll do a Q&A session for the entire panel of speakers. For those of you viewing online, you may type your questions in at any time, and we will answer those at the end also. So we're here to talk about the Future Energy Jobs Act, or FEJA, as some of you may know, and it passed in 2016 to help Illinois decrease its dependency on fossil fuels and ensure a long-term renewable plan with 25% renewable portfolio standards. FEJA defines renewable energy resources to include wind, solar thermal, PV, biodiesel, anaerobic digestion, crops, and organic waste biomass. This will be the first of our series for ISTC, which will highlight different aspects of the renewable resources defined in this legislation. We're looking ahead to set up our next seminar, so keep an eye out for our announcements. All right, so let's get started here. Our first speaker here to discuss FEJA's long-term renewable resource procurement plan is Carrie Shepard with the Illinois Environmental Council. IEC serves as the environmental community's eyes, ears, and voice in Springfield, working to ensure that a more healthful environment for Illinois residents. Carrie is the policy director at IEC, where he works with partner organizations on issues designing environmental-friendly energy laws and overseeing regulatory implementation of Illinois energy policy, such as the Future Energy Jobs Act. As a Chicago native, Carrie is also an alumni of the city's public school system. During his time at the University of Illinois, Carrie worked on campaigns such as President Obama's re-election team and the Sierra Club's advocacy for change in Illinois coal policy. After college, he attended the University of Chicago Law School, where he spent 2 years litigating for environmental protection cases at the Abrams Environmental Law Clinic. And Carrie has also served in the Chicago Mayor's office and teaches a class on formal logic. Following Carrie to discuss siting and land use issues is Laurel Becerra with the Coalition for Community Solar Access, and she'll be joining us online from North Carolina. Laurel is on the policy team for the CCSA and has led efforts here in Illinois for the past 2 years. Through this work, Ms. Becerra guides members' efforts to influence the policymaking process in order to achieve balanced outcomes through research, comment writing, and participation in stakeholder processes. Prior to CCSA, Laurel worked for the Interstate Renewable Energy Council for 7 years on interconnection, net metering, community solar, and other policy efforts around the country. She has co-authored numerous technical reports on these topics to help inform policymakers of best practices in order to improve the access to bring down cost of renewable energy. Laurel has a Master in Arts in Sustainable Development from the School for International Training and a BA from UNC Chapel Hill. And last but not least, here to discuss the resources that are available for counties to support the development of new solar is Shannon Fulton from the Illinois Solar Energy Association. ICEA is a nonprofit organization that promotes solar energy through education and advocacy. Shannon is an ICEA board member and currently serves on the organization's policy committee, working to advance the Illinois solar industry's job growth. Shannon is the Director of Commercial Development for Straight Up Solar and a residential and commercial and community solar development and installation company. She has served in many capacities at the company, including design, installation, sales, business development, and policy. Shannon also lives her passion for ending energy poverty by working as a solar ambassador with We Care Solar, a nonprofit organization dedicated to bringing reliable solar electricity to health clinics in developing worlds. She is a licensed professional geologist with a degree in geology, hydrology, and renewable energy, and is the happy owner of a 9.72 kW solar PV system. So please join me today in welcoming all of our speakers.
Okay. Everybody hear me okay? Is that microphone on? Yeah? Yeah, the microphone is... Oh, I see. Okay. I'm not getting any complaints, so I think it's okay. Okay, sounds good. So, first of all, I think I walked up here a little bit too soon. Sorry to kind of awkwardly hover over in the corner there, but I appreciate everybody not staring at me the whole time. That was helped me out quite a bit there. So thank you, Jennifer, for the introduction. I appreciate it. Again, my name is Carrie. I'm the Policy Director at the Illinois Environmental Council. And it is great to be back in Champaign. I did go to undergrad here. I studied history there, and then I moved back up to Chicago, and I've been there since then. So this is the clicker for the. Oh, sorry. Oh, just here we go. Okay, that works great. Okay, so really quick background. So where I work, the Illinois Environmental Council, it's an advocacy organization that does a combination of public education as well as legislative advocacy and regulatory oversight for Illinois environmental laws. One of the big pushes that we've been involved in for the past several years has been involving clean energy infrastructure in the state of Illinois. I was not at the Environmental Council during the time that FEJA was passed, but I came on shortly thereafter, a couple years later, and I have been working on our clean energy policy since then. So, IC does more than clean energy policy, though. We also work on issues such as clean water, agricultural runoff, conservation, animal species protection, many different issues. And we represent about 80 different environmental organizations in the state of Illinois. So our goal is basically to take the policy that is put together by the best people in environmental protection and make that the policy of the state of Illinois government. One of the great ways we do that is we keep track of a legislative scorecard that shows how legislators have ruled or have voted on environmental issues in the state of Illinois. It's been a really powerful tool to see if your legislator is someone who's been supporting the kinds of environmental policies we support, and for you to make voting decisions based upon that. So, before I get into the details of the Future Energy Jobs Act, I wanted to talk a little bit about the history of how the Future Energy Jobs Act, I'm just going to call that FEJA from this point on, how FEJA came to be, because it was not the smoothest process. Like a lot of legislation, it was the result of negotiation, it was the result of changes in circumstances, and ultimately it was a compromise bill, but I think it was a great compromise. We've really brought Illinois quite far because of it. So really the process for statewide environmental policy started in about 2010. This is when the state of Illinois was starting to realize that because of the Obama administration's Clean Power Plan proposal, we were going to have to come up with some sort of a method by which the state was going to reduce our carbon and greenhouse gas output. And so the environmental groups started to do some research, draft language for potential bills. We did pass the Smart Grid bill, but this is we didn't get everything that we wanted. Ultimately, about 5 years later, the Clean Jobs bill, which is pretty close to what FEJA ultimately was like, was introduced. And additionally, Exelon introduced a bill at the same time. At this point, Exelon, who owns some of the nuclear generating power in the state of Illinois, was realizing that there were concerns with respect to the long-term financial health of the nuclear power plants, and they saw it as a priority to make sure that those plants could stay online. Because of this combination of interests, ultimately what happened was the representatives of the environmental organizations, as well as Exelon and other people who were stakeholders in the state of Illinois, were basically forced to create a compromise bill that became the Future Energy Jobs Act. That was what was passed by the Illinois General Assembly and ultimately signed by Governor Rauner to become law in late 2016. So that's not a short time process, but we did accomplish quite a bit of it. So a few things the Future Energy Jobs Act does. I'm going to get more to the details in a moment, but I'm not going to give an overview. For one thing, Illinois is going to be reducing its carbon emissions by more than 50% from 2012 levels by 2030. That is a huge, huge change in the energy generation. Not that long ago, about half of our power in Illinois came from coal. We're down to about 30%, if I'm thinking of the statistics right now, and about half our power is still nuclear. So as we draw that down, or as we draw coal power down and other carbon-intensive energy sources, we are really reducing our carbon emissions. About 70% of the funds from FEJA will focus on kickstarting clean energy. And the bill is going to invest more than $750 million in programs for low-income communities. I think you're going to hear more about these programs in detail later today, one of which is Illinois Solar for All, which is designed to help low-income customers, nonprofits, community centers get access to rooftop and community solar programs. There is Community Solar, which is essentially paying a subscription to a larger solar array. And there are job trainings programs that are designed to make sure that this huge investment in Illinois for new clean energy is also going to be benefiting people who need new jobs and could definitely benefit from new jobs in the clean energy economy. So what exactly did FEJA do? How is it accomplishing these things? Well, one of the big things about FEJA is the renewable portfolio standards. So Illinois' 25% renewable energy goal by 2025 is something that we had previously, but we've had some pretty significant changes to the way that we're going to accomplish that in a way that's actually going to make it possible to achieve those, hopefully with some caveats that will probably be brought up later. One of which is the change in definition of renewable energy resource goals to renewable energy credits for how the funding or how the subsidy offered by the state is going to incentivize renewable energy. What this did was it took the law from something that basically had a lowest cost purchase process for these subsidies, and took that and turned it into a program by which the state of Illinois was investing the vast majority of their funds in the creation of new clean energy projects. So it is essentially a technical fix, but a very important one that made sure that we are building new renewable energy in the state of Illinois. That section down there, you can read that if you are interested. You'll have access to this this slideshow, but that's basically the Illinois Power Agency's explanation of that change. Okay, so here is how, here are the projected actually changes in generation in the state of Illinois. So by 2020, we're expected to generate 650 megawatts of new wind power and 1,350 megawatts of new solar power, ramping that up to 2030, 1,350 megawatts of new wind, 2,700 megawatts of new solar. Now, the law is designed for there to be rough parity between the amount of solar and wind resources that are going to be in Illinois. But the reason why we have different numbers here is because solar has to catch up. We're in the process right now of installing solar at a faster rate than we did wind, because under the previous legal regime before FEJA was passed, there was a greater incentive to install wind in the state of Illinois over solar. So that is in the process of coming to be about equal. Okay, so a little more information on some of the benefits here. So this is going to be channeling about $180 million a year from utility companies to build new wind and solar. But these are basically incentives, that $180 million. The actual investment in Illinois, I believe the Natural Resources Defense Council estimated that to be about between $12 and $14 billion in private sector investment in the state of Illinois. This is the money that is designed to actually kind of kickstart that and make it a profitable move so that the companies will begin building in Illinois. Additionally, There's going to be about a $5 billion investment in energy efficiency programs to reduce families' electricity bills. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a bit. But the idea behind that is that this is one of the big ways that the Future Energy Jobs Act isn't just transitioning us from dirtier energy to clean energy, but it's also going to be saving Illinois residents money in the process if you're subscribed to one of the 3 investor-owned utilities in the state. The goal of this, of course, is to reduce not sole goal, but one of the goals is to reduce 32 million tons of CO2 air pollution by 2030. And obviously that will be great for both greenhouse gas reduction as well as for the co-pollutants that are associated with that have health impacts other than just carbon. Okay, so a little bit about what community solar is. So the Illinois Power Agency is going to be purchasing renewable energy credits, which is the incentive, from these community solar projects at set prices through the adjustable block program to meet the state's renewable portfolio standard compliance requirements. Essentially what that means is that part of FEJA is going to have a scheduled price for the subsidies that are associated with community solar projects that are going to allow investors a much greater degree of certainty when they're actually deciding to invest in these projects. And the benefit of that as well is that the law is going to require a portion of the financial savings that are generated from these subsidies to be passed on to lower income subscribers. So this program is great because it gives lower income people more affordable electricity, it's clean electricity, and investors have a greater degree of certainty on that. If you're curious as to the distinction between the adjustable block program and other renewable energy credits, the big distinction there is that utility scale, being the larger, not the adjustable block program projects, are designed to be more cost effective, where the prices will adjust and be almost certainly lower for the RECs than they would be for the adjustable block program prices. Okay. So the other big part about the Future Energy Jobs Act that isn't talked a ton about in the environmental community, but I want to give you guys kind of a primer on the way this act works, is the zero emissions credits program. So this was kind of part of the compromise in the process of passing the Future Energy Jobs Act. So ZEC is the kind of acronym that's commonly used to talk about zero emissions credits. Is a credit. It's a financial subsidy that is provided by the state and collected through resident bills that is designed to basically keep several nuclear power plants in the state of Illinois financially profitable. This program is going to continue through 2027, and this was the big kind of push that Exelon made during the Future Energy Jobs Act negotiations to get part of their interests accommodated in this legislation. Now, some people are okay with this because nuclear power does not have a carbon emissions impact. There are carbon emissions associated with certain elements of getting the fuel and details like that, but by and large, it is a zero emissions technology. There are, of course, other environmental concerns associated with nuclear power, but this was the compromise that was reached, and this is the compromise that is going to be, in combination with renewable energy being wind and solar, significantly reducing our greenhouse gases and carbon emissions in Illinois over the course of the next 8 to 15 years. Sorry, not 15. 2025 and 2030 are kind of the benchmarks there. Okay. And then finally, a little more information about the energy efficiency elements within FEJA. So energy efficiency is one of the most financially efficient, sorry, I'm trying not to use the word efficient in this process. Energy efficiency is one of the best ways to save money and reduce electricity usage, but it's not talked about a ton in the renewable energy space because it's not an electricity generation process. It's an electricity reduction process. In comparison to the term megawatts, which is used to describe an amount of electricity, kind of the colloquial term people throw around is negawatts, like negative watts, right? Where you're accomplishing the same thing using less electricity in the process. Now, the Future Energy Jobs Act puts mandates on the utilities to reduce their energy usage. ComEd by 2030 has to reduce their energy usage by 21.5%, and Ameren, the utility in this territory, has to reduce it by 16%. We do have a third utility, which is Mid-American. It's a much smaller utility in the state of Illinois. I don't know their statistic off the top of my head for how much they have to reduce their energy usage by. But the point is, the Citizens Utility Board, which is the organization responsible for advocating to make sure that citizens in Illinois are, well, other places too, but in Illinois in this circumstance, are making sure that they don't pay excessive amounts of money on their utility bills. They project that, in part due to energy efficiency, each customer in Illinois will receive a $14.80 reduction on their electricity bills each year, which basically means that despite all of these incredible construction projects and seemingly expensive changes in the way the electricity is being generated in Illinois, from the customer perspective, you're going to be saving money. So that's really what kind of the impressive thing about FEJA is that it's bold strokes, but it's also something that does not hurt lower income people or even cause any unnecessary expenses for the rest of the population. Okay, so again, I'm Kerry. Appreciate everybody kind of listening to me today. And do we want to do 1 or 2 questions now, or okay? Sure. Looks like we have one right. Okay, yeah. Oh, gotcha. Gotcha. Mm-hmm.
Hi, I'd like to know, for the social cost of carbon,
Mm-hmm.
does that have an update to it,
Mm-hmm.
or is it locked in with FEJA and it would only be updated? Like, is
Mm-hmm.
there a method for maintaining that number? It's like $16 per
Yes.
CO2e, I believe.
So I believe that the social cost of carbon is in the statute that was passed. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I believe that's the way that it's set up. Ultimately, the ZEC, the zero emissions credit pricing, is designed to meet the financial requirements of the the zero emissions electricity generation resources, being the nuclear plants that it was designed to support. So the social cost of carbon was one way to kind of get to that calculation of what that number should look like. But it has less to do with tracking the impacts of carbon than it has to do with providing a certain amount of subsidy so that those plants stay financially profitable. Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. Oh, sorry, I have to wait for the microphone there. Yes.
The goal you mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
the 50% reduction by 2030,
Yes.
that's strictly addressing electric power generation. Is that correct?
So the Future Energy Jobs Act only addresses the electricity sector, being, if I tell you understand this, but for everybody, there's 2 basic sources of energy generation and emissions, being the electricity sector, our lights, the power of our homes and our offices, and the transportation sector, being our cars, our shipping costs, that kind of a thing. The Future Energy Jobs Act goal is to have 25% renewable energy by 2025. The 50% calculation being the reduction in our emissions. I believe that is only addressing the electricity sector, but I'm not sure that I've read the study that was cited from. Yeah, so I would be surprised if it's not just the electricity sector. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for Kerry? Okay. Well, thanks, Kerry, for your presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much,
and we'll
Jennifer.
take more questions at the end.
Okay.
So next up we have online, Laurel is going to give us a presentation on the issues around land use issues in solar and siting issues. And she's going to talk about what's been happening in Illinois with community solar. So we'll turn the mic over to Laurel. Laurel, can you hear us?
Hi, I can. Thank you. I'm just trying to see. It's not showing full screen, is it, again? How did I do that yesterday? Let me see. I might need to figure this out just a second.
Yeah, you just need to make sure that you're displaying, because you've got the dual display. You just need to.
Yeah, Oh, I don't have a dual display right now, so
Oh, okay.
maybe that's, it's weird. Did that change it? No. Okay, let me try again. Let me see. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then I'm going to, give me just 1 minute here. Show main screen. I'll try this one this time. Okay, does that work?
That looks good.
Okay, great. Great. So again, my name is Laurel Passera. I am on the policy team for the Coalition for Community Solar Access. And if you haven't heard of us, we are the national trade association that promotes community solar across the country. We intervene generally at the state level. We're active in a number of states right now, and I've been heading up Illinois efforts for a couple years now since the bill was initially passed. So we have a great group of members that are working through the trade association. I think we have about 50 members total, 50 member companies, and those include developers, service providers, law firms, nonprofits, so kind of the whole spectrum of people and companies involved in community solar. We're also active in New York, Massachusetts, California, Oregon, some other states, and we're hoping to expand that number of community solar states this year with some of our legislative efforts. And so, as is typical when a new program gets developed or gets implemented at the state level, the automatic question is sort of from a lot of local county officials and you know, land use people, where is all that solar going to go? So you can imagine that some of the land use issues and questions around solar might be different in Rhode Island as they are from Arizona, as they are from Illinois. And, you know, so we have to sort of address these issues every time in different states in different ways because the issues are always a little bit different. But there are some common themes that run throughout. And so I thought I'd spend a little bit of time addressing some of these issues and sort of, you know, helping people think through sort of the broader land use implications. First of all, I'll start by, you know, just talking about sort of what solar needs. You know, you can't put solar anywhere. And based on FEJA, there are a lot of opportunities to put solar on rooftops, brownfields, and other sort of urban areas on existing structures. But a lot of the solar is going to be ground mounted. You get much better economies of scale if you put it in a field as opposed to on a rooftop. So that's kind of where I'm going to be focusing my perspective today are sort of those larger ground mount facilities. And since I'm in community solar, I'll be talking about those 2 megawatt community solar facilities generally. But thinking through what they need, typically you need about 5 to 7 acres per megawatt. So, you know, that's 10 to 14 for a 2 megawatt facility. And so most, you know, commercial and residential industrial sites are not going to be large enough, which typically leaves agriculture as the other sort of, you know, land type that we look to for siting these facilities. You need, you know, you can't put solar in the middle of a forest. Obviously, you'd have to cut down a lot of trees. But you also don't have good points of interconnection in the middle of large tracts of land like that. So you'd want to have it somewhere near a point of interconnection with the utility line. Ideally within, you know, a short distance of that line, although you can run extra lines to get to the field, but, you know, every additional foot of line that you have to run is going to cost more. So, you know, to sort of minimize those interconnection costs, you want it to be, you know, fairly near a point of interconnection. You need quality roads to get the equipment in. You need nearby electric load so that electric generation has a place to go. You have to think about, you know, the environmental attributes of the land. You can't generally put it in a wetland or places that have, you know, sensitive, you know, environmental endangered species or things like that. So, and also the slope is important. You want to think about, you know, you don't want to have to grade a slope too much. You need to have a fairly, fairly low grade slope to the land, or no slope at all to make it viable. So all of these things add up to, not that many places that you can site a larger solar facility. Illinois obviously has a lot more land than, say, Rhode Island. So there are more opportunities to site those, that fit these criteria. But just wanted to sort of go over that, those general characteristics. When we talk about agricultural land, one of the common things that we hear is that we don't want to give up our prime agricultural lands to solar. And we don't either, because everyone likes to eat. I in particular like to eat. So, you want to think about how to best incentivize solar to be placed in the right areas, while also thinking about sort of what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. So I'm going to talk through a few things that I've learned from the solar developers that I work with regarding zoning on agricultural land. So there are a lot of different definitions of what agricultural land actually means. You can have land that's zoned as agricultural. You can have land with the potential for agriculture based on sort of certain qualities about the land. It has high quality soil, which we're going to get to in a minute. And then you have land that is actually in agricultural use. So you can think about, there could be a number of different siting potentials for all of these different things. And you want to kind of think about what you mean by agricultural land before you start to think about where solar should go and where it shouldn't go. People often talk about prime soil designations, and these are typically based on maps that I think it's the USDA or some federal and state bodies put together based on their soil mapping exercises. And a lot of these things, prime soils could encompass a lot of different types of, zoning. So you could have prime soils in a residential area. You could have them, in an agricultural area, but it just means that they have certain characteristics that are conducive to farming. So slope, fertility, permeability, that kind of thing. And like I said, they're based on these state and federal surveys, but one thing to note about those is that a lot of these are not updated all of that regularly. If you think about how long it takes to map out soils, you can't do that every year. Sometimes they're decades old soil maps in certain areas, and you can't have a prime soil, or you can't have a soil map for every individual property. So if you think about a large agricultural area, even if it says prime agricultural land, every site is going to be a patchwork of soil. So you're not going to have prime soil on every single piece of that land. It's just, it's going to be a patchwork essentially. So a lot of people, they want to talk about preserving prime soils and prime agricultural land. But those are just a few things to think about. What do we mean by agricultural land and what do we mean by prime soils? So we're going to kind of get to that in a minute. There are, a lot of benefits to the landowner when you talk about solar siting. They carry a much higher lease payment typically than you get from other farmers. So something that's important to think about is that the farmer is not often, or not always, I guess, the land owner of a property. The landowner can lease to farmers, lease to multiple farmers, but the landowner is going to make the decision about what to do about that land. Farming is an inherently risky endeavor. So, you've got prices that, rise and fall every year. You've got floods. You've got things that make farming just incredibly risky. And a lot of farmers have to sell their land to residential development. And that sort of entails a permanent loss of that land. So when you think about how you want to, if you want to restrict solar on certain agricultural properties, think about the farmer maybe that might carve off part of his less productive land, or a landowner, I guess, and lease that to a solar developer to get that guaranteed payment every year, year over year, so that they can continue to farm on the rest of their land and not have to sell off to residential developers. So in essence, it's a way that it can enable farmers and landowners to continue farming rather than to have to sell their land. I think about 60 to 80% of farmland is lost to residential development every year, typically. Another thing that people think about is decommissioning these projects once they're past their useful life, and they can last 25, 30 years or even more. And you don't want to see just solar junk lying out in a field once it's past its prime. But the good thing about it is that there are, the Agricultural Impact Mitigation Agreement with AIMA, most people are probably familiar with that in Illinois, requires developers to have a decommissioning plan and put down an upfront bond to ensure that plan is achievable. So Illinois has, thought about this in an aim to make sure that there is not that problem of just, solar waste lying around after it's past its prime. Another important thing to think about which is really big in Illinois, which I did not know about until I started working in Illinois, were drainage tiles. And I'll just say that solar developers really know and understand how important drainage tiles are to Illinois farmers. So they kind of know how to work around them and to mitigate damage. But also, once they do take those solar facilities out of the property and return that farmland back to agricultural use, the AIMA that we just talked about just also requires developers to replace and repair any damaged tiles, so that you're not going to be hindering the drainage of the facility. Another couple things to note is that a lot of solar projects are now incorporating pollinator-friendly species and plantings, and that can improve the production of the agricultural land around it. So there are just starting to be some interesting studies coming out about what these pollinator plantings do for nearby agriculture. One study showed that, I think it was a NREL study, National Renewable Energy Lab. They showed that soybeans can have up to 18% greater yield if you have some pollinator plants around it, and so they're definitely important for some plants over others. But if you have those plants nearby, they can really improve the yield of the farmland. And last thing I'll say, I think this is my last slide, but I'll just say that it sounds like there's going to be a lot of solar coming. And there is, but compared to the amount of land in Illinois, it's actually, lost my slide here. It's actually, not as much as one might think. Illinois farmland covers about 27 million acres, and so I just did the quick math to look at the community solar aspect that's coming in the next couple of years, and that's going to need about 1,100 acres, a little over 1,100, 1,200 acres, and that's about 0.004% of the agricultural land in Illinois. If that gives you something to sort of wrap your head around and think about how much that will entail. And some of that will actually go on rooftops and smaller facilities. It's only so that's like the max end of it. That's the largest percentage for community solar in the near term. It's probably actually going to be less than that. So. Just a few things to think about regarding land use and solar. I'm happy to take a couple questions if there are any. And I have a lot of resources if you're interested in knowing more about this. I just wanted to hit some of the highlights today.
Thanks, Laurel.
Sure.
Sorry, we have Laura here in the room too.
That's okay. No worries. I get it all the time.
We don't have any questions online, I see you right now. So we've got a couple here in the room, and then we'll move on to Shannon.
Yes, I didn't hear any mention about sort of clover leaves along roadways or old industrial sites that maybe are vacant. Is that all being considered somehow?
I don't understand the question. Can you kind of reframe it for me?
So I think the question is cloverleaf on and off ramps off of the interstate. We're wondering if there's been any discussions about adding solar to those unused portions of land. Is that correct? And old industrial sites.
Okay. That's helpful. I don't know the answer to that. I think there are certainly developers who do look at brownfield development, so over industrial sites. I would imagine it would be difficult to do highway off ramps and on ramps. It seems like a logical place to put it, but if you think about having to access those, it might be challenging or dangerous for people to get to those sites on a regular basis to do maintenance because of all the traffic. And it may be difficult I don't think it's enough space to really have an economy of scale because they're just not that big. It's not that big of an area. So I'm not sure if there have been those discussions, but I haven't heard anything about that. I will note that brownfield development, so developing over sort of industrial areas or in polluted sites or anything, that does come with a cost. There are, it is more expensive to do that because it's a lot more risky because you don't know what you're going to find when you go there. A lot of people just ballast them, so they don't actually dig into the ground. And that's one way to do it, but it's always a lot more risky to do brownfield development and more costly. So I'll note that.
Okay, thanks, Laurel. We've got about 3 more questions online.
Okay, the first online question is, are there any updates as far as PJM asking FERC to overturn parts of FEJA? I think I got that, yeah.
I don't know the answer to that, but I can look it up if you will note who
okay,
is asking, I can get back to you.
That might be a question for Carrie.
Okay.
So the question is, are there any updates with PJM being the transmission organization that allows for trading of electricity in the Chicago area through the East Coast? There's some legal disputes as to whether certain Illinois programs are legal because of incentives that they receive and whether it's fair for them to compete. FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, is expected to rule on that, I believe, January 15th. So there are no updates at this time. Yeah.
Okay, and then the second question is, aren't there incentives for brownfields developments within FEJA?
I believe so. I haven't been paying as close of attention to that, so Shannon or Carrie might be better positioned to speak to that.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Are there incentives for brownfields development?
There are incentives for rec prices for brownfields. I'm sure, Shannon, you could talk about this as well. But I'm not sure redevelopment specifically as far as like changing the land. I don't know if there are any. I don't believe there are any incentives for changing the land, just for placing solar at that location.
Okay, thanks. I think we're going to hold the rest of the questions until afterwards for the entire panel. So next up, we have Shannon Fulton with Straight Up Solar and Illinois Solar Energy Association. And Shannon's going to talk about updates to the adjustable block program that Carrie had spoke about earlier. So we'll let you take it away.
Thank you.
Okay, just a second while I get the slides up.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you. So we've had a nice introduction on where we've come from collectively. It's for can you not hear me? Okay, sure. So we had a nice presentation from Carrie about that gave us some insight as to where we've come from, the long road to even get to signing the Future Energy Jobs Act at the end of 2016, beginning of 2017. And And what I'm going to speak about a little bit is to what we're seeing in the queue. Okay, so Laurel talked about CSA, which is clearly the leading sector right now in terms of interest in the market. And you'll see through some of the numbers from ComEd and Ameren that is in fact true, and you'll see sort of what we're seeing in the slides to come. And I also have a little bit of information, of course, to share with you about probably the best resource for individuals interested in learning more about what's happening in Illinois, staying on the solar front, and staying in contact with the developments, really is the Illinois Solar Energy Association. And my involvement started back in 2009, and I tell you, from that time to where we are now, the organization now has 150 businesses that are members of the organization and use ISEA and CCSA and SEIA as their primary resources for information to operate within the state. And ISEA has grown to the point where we really do serve as a primary resource for not only homeowners but also businesses wanting to operate in Illinois. So ISEA's mission is to educate and advocate for the widespread application of solar, wind, and other forms of renewable energy to the people of Illinois. It was established in 1975 as a 501c3. It's a membership-based organization, over 500 individual members now, but like I said, over 150 businesses. That speaks to the fact that there are businesses coming in from all over the country to Illinois. Illinois has one of the richest incentive programs in the country right now, and that will prove itself out in the next year and beyond, when you start seeing all of the solar developments being executed. And many of you are probably aware of the Illinois Solar Tour, which happens. The one thing to write down in your notes right now is if you're interested in solar and advancing solar in Illinois, to please participate on February 6th in the Solar Lobby Day that's coming up. Carrie mentioned the distribution of electricity generation in Illinois earlier. It's true. And these are 2016 stats, so I don't expect a lot to have changed between now and then. But a little over half of our energy, our electricity, comes from nuclear, and you can see the breakdown with coal, nuclear, natural gas. The point of this graph really, or this pie chart really, is to show you that there's just right now obviously very little renewable energy that has been developed in the state. We estimate approximately 100 megawatts right now of solar having been installed in Illinois. It's probably a little bit more than that by now, but the point of making putting that estimate in here really is just to make the distinction between what we have now and what's to come, what we will see actually get built in the next few years as part of this first round of the long-term renewable plan. So we've heard anywhere from 2,000 to 2,500 megawatts by 2025, and even more by 2030. So those estimates will vary based on what the demand is, and where that 25% renewable energy generation, what the demand that's based on. It does have some variability. But anyway, you can see, right, the point is it's a lot of growth in the next few years. It's a lot of development. And just to give you a rule of thumb, one megawatt of solar energy provides enough electricity for about 150 homes. Okay, that gives you some reference for scale. So to give you an idea of the Renewable Portfolio Standard current, where we are on that road to 25% renewable energy by 2025, we estimate that based on current load estimates, and this is just carving with a chainsaw, right? This is just to give you some sense of where we are in trying to achieve that 25% renewable energy by 2025. By 2020, we estimate, given the current funding mechanism, given the current funding mechanism and the money available as part of the Future Energy Jobs Act and the Adjustable Block Program, that we could reach roughly 7% by 2020. Okay? And that's short of our 2020 RPS goal of getting to about 18% or something. So when we talk about the goal and the reality of getting to that goal, you can see that because the RPS was broken for many years and it wasn't operating properly, that we're behind. Even with all this growth that we're talking about, we're still going to be behind. So there's going to have to be activity legislatively by all the same organizations that were involved in getting FEJA passed the first time to get us back on track. And ISEA is going to be an important partner in that effort. So the things that are driving growth, right? Smart policy, cost of energy continues to rise, cost of the technology continues to drop, and the incentives in particular associated with smart policy on the state side are SRECs, the solar renewable energy credit payments based on the production of these different systems. Smart inverter rebate, this is a commercial competitive rate class incentive. The SRECs are available for all projects. The smart inverter rebate, that it's a utility incentive, are available for commercial projects only. That may change at some point in the future, or will change at some point in the future, but this is the case currently. And then state depreciation, commercial only. On the federal side, we have a 30% federal tax credit with no cap. That's legislated through 2019. It will step down gradually. You can see the step down rates accordingly. And then on top of that, for commercial projects, you also have bonus depreciation 100% in year one. So when you stack, from a commercial perspective, when you stack all that up, we're seeing, it's a really smart investment. Not only for residential homeowners, but also from a commercial perspective. Okay, to set the stage for the slides to come, where I'm going to show you sort of on a high level what's in queue and in process that will be, for the most part, entered into the Adjustable Block Program. I want to show you what phase one of the long-term plan, the funding for the Adjustable Block Program, and this is specifically related to the solar renewable energy credits. Okay, this is the state incentive Solar Renewable Energy Credit Adjustable Block Program. So I want to set the stage for what's being funded. Okay. Group A, Ameren, Mount Carmel, rural electric co-ops in Ameren territory. Okay. So essentially what that means is Ameren territory and the municipal and electric co-ops in Ameren territory. Okay. They all fall into this Group A category. And in each group, the categories are divided into small, which is primarily residential, large, and community solar. Okay, and within large, there are several subcategories as well. But this gives you some sense of Group A, which is our group, Ameren territory, 22 megawatts. It's 22 megawatts in Block 1, 22 in Block 2, and 5.5 in Block 3. For Group B, which is up north, ComEd, Mid-American, and the associated co-ops and munis up there, it's 52, 52, and 12. So stands to reason that there would be some difference because of the population density, right? There's going to be more solar developed up in the northern part of the state because of the population density, and it's linked to the number of off-takers of energy up there. So given that, this was released by ComEd at the Solar Power Midwest conference in Chicago in October. So this is their record of what they have in queue, or had in queue at the time. Okay, so if we remember, Well, let's set this up. So you have C&I, which is large commercial, greater than 2 megawatts. We won't really focus on that. But the distributed generation and community solar are the three in the center there, the orange, yellow, and red. So if we look specifically at community solar, the 1,214 megawatts of community solar that they have in the interconnection queue, doesn't mean all of that will be entered into the lottery, but that's what they have in queue, okay? Compared to the 50, the one, well, if you combine blocks 1 and 2, about 104 megawatts, right? That shows the difference in interest versus what's being funded. It's significant, and that's in ComEd territory, okay? And we'll see the large DG, the C&I is right at that sort of blocks 1 and 2. The disparity isn't quite isn't nearly what we're seeing for C&I, but 57 megawatts for C&I, and you can see there appears to be less than 2 megawatts. There appears to be a lot of interest, but it will probably exceed the block 1 levels. Okay, but this really does mostly show that from a residential perspective, there's a lot of interest, but it doesn't exceed currently the level of funding. C&I is kind of right in the middle, that sort of exceeding somewhat. It probably will go to a lottery and exceed blocks 1 and 2, but we're close to seeing what we might have expected. But from a CSA perspective, there's quite a bit of disparity. So Ameren, Illinois reports their information a little bit differently. They don't consider that they have an interconnection queue. They just have a number of net metering applications, and that's how they track their numbers. So here in Ameren territory, to give you an idea of the level of growth that we've seen, from April of 2008 to February of 2016, and again, this was presented at the Solar Power Midwest conference in October, we see that approximately 3 megawatts of net metering load. Okay, 470 total net metering customers. Now that included some small wind, but primarily solar residential, with some additional non-residential. Okay, so we're about 3 megawatts during that time. And then a year later, we're up to 5.4 megawatts essentially. Okay, January of 17. Now this is at the beginning, this is just after FEJA was passed. Okay, so from as of November 8th, there is, did I miss a slide here? Let's see. April 8th to January, that's just a duplicate. We are at, for community solar applications, they're at 755, 1,475 megawatts. And again, if we recall the Ameren numbers, we have 22 megawatts that will get funded from block 1 and 22 from block 2. So we're probably looking at about 45 to 52 megawatts of CSA of community solar that could get funded in this first 3 blocks of RECs, compared to the 1,477 that they have in applications. Okay, so it's a lot of interest. And from the C&I perspective, this level 2 distributed generation up to 2 megawatts is about at 82 megawatts. Again, there is about 44 to 50 megawatts already allocated in those 3 blocks of RECs. So it's almost double what we think might be funded in the first 3 rounds. So what we aren't seeing in the funding necessarily is the 25% out that if you've been paying attention from the beginning over the course of the last 2 years, you may recall that the Illinois Power Agency smartly held back 25% of the adjustable block program SRECs to just as reserve to watch the market move, right? Watch the market respond to this initial opening of very rich incentives. And so they will also be allocating that 25% to fill in the gaps where they see a lot of interest compared to the available funding. So though we don't know exactly A, when that will be released, or B, where they will fill, what gaps they will fill, it stands to reason that that extra 25% will go toward reducing the disparity on the community solar side and to an additional degree on the large commercial and industrial side. So that's what we don't know is how much of an impact that flexible 25% will have to fill the gaps. We can see, because of the disparity on the community solar side, that it's probably not going to do a whole lot to change the odds of projects getting what we call a lottery ticket, but it will certainly help. So all of the work that Carrie showed that we had done just to get Future Energy Jobs Act passed, it doesn't end there. As you can see, there is a ton of interest. There's not enough funding. We're behind on our RPS goals, even with all the exciting, everything that we're seeing on the development side. But there's a lot to be done in 2019, a whole lot to be done. And these are some of the areas that ICA is planning to focus on in 2019. So continuing to fund the development, the level of interest that we've seen, and to continue to expand the Illinois market. Continue to support job training. We are seeing quite an improvement and advancement of the job training programs. They're developing. The first few tranches of students are graduating from these programs that were funded by the Future Energy Jobs Act. So it's really exciting to see that, but that just needs to continue to grow so that we can meet so that the job workforce can meet the demand. So we're going to continue to advocate for additional funding for job training. Improving the net metering policies, interconnection. We've seen a lot of, you can imagine with all of the applications that the utilities have been receiving, they've struggled to get interconnection reviews done in a timely manner, and there are some improvements on the interconnection side that need to be made that we're going to advocate for. And storage is on the horizon. About the time we think we've made it in Illinois with renewable energy, on the next big opportunity for the industry and for individuals and businesses is storage. So we're going to begin the advocacy work to adopt the policies for energy storage, and some initial discussions on the state-based capacity market, which is over my head. I can't talk any more about that, but it's an important policy aspect that we're going to begin to talk about as well. So these are just some photos of solar installations that are happening now and have over the past couple of years. As I just wanted to show you these as an example of what Straight Up Solar does and what many solar companies in the state are doing currently. And you're going to see a lot more of this type of development and large solar farm development happening in the next several years. Not only for private entities, but that picture in the upper left is at the YWCA in Bloomington, Illinois. So a lot of nonprofits have been and will continue to be able to benefit from installation of solar at their facilities. And speaking to the resources available that are becoming available for not only businesses but also individuals, Straight Up Solar has doubled in size in the last year, all because of the Future Energy Jobs Act. We're only one example of many companies that are coming into the state and hiring people in state. I'm a graduate from the Renewable Energy Program at ISU. Back when I graduated, students were leaving the state to find jobs. That's no longer the case. We've hired 5 people out of that program alone, and we'll continue to do so. So it's really exciting to see the dynamics changing, not only from solar panel by solar panel aspect, but from actually providing people jobs here in the state. It's truly happening, and we're really proud to be a part of that process. Again, ISEA is a wonderful resource for you to just connect with. The memberships are cheap, $45 or $50 as an individual. You will get much more out of that than your $55 or $50 membership fee. It's really a wonderful resource. So I encourage you all to sign up, register. Thank you.
Okay, so we have some questions online, and then we'll take some questions in the room.
Actually, just one online question. Could you talk about incentives available to homeowners for solar installations? And I don't know who wants to take that.
The primary incentives for homeowners are the solar renewable energy credit payments, the adjustable block program. That's the program that into which homeowners will submit their projects to determine their eligible projects to receive their SREC payments. And these are payments that, cash money, payments that homeowners receive based on the amount of energy their systems produce. So for every 1,000 kilowatt hours of energy produced, it doesn't matter how much of that you use in your home, for every 1,000 kilowatt hours of energy produced, that's one SREC. So one solar renewable energy credit. And the Illinois Power Agency the adjustable block program provides funding for the retirement of those SRECs, being purchased and the retirement of those SRECs from homeowners and these solar farms and commercial developments as well. This is the main mechanism by which the state is getting to 25% renewable energy by 2025. The state is essentially, and utilities are counterparty to these SRECs, but essentially at a high level, the state is purchasing the green benefits of the energy being produced by all of us who are operating solar installations, and they're retiring the green benefits from those on behalf of the entire state, and therefore getting us to 25% renewable energy by 2025. Okay, this is the mechanism by which the state is getting to its renewable portfolio standard, the main mechanism, renewable portfolio standard goals.
Okay, we have a couple questions here in the room.
Maybe, I've never heard the term smart inverter before. Could you define that?
Sure. The smart inverter most inverters being installed today meet the criteria of a smart inverter as defined here in this context. The smart inverter, the smart inverter rebate currently is only available for the competitive rate class, a commercial level rate class. So a smart inverter is essentially one that, if we break it way down to the basic level, that the utility on their side can communicate both on site and with the utility, essentially. There are many other criteria associated with that on a very nerdy engineering level, but that's essentially what will distinguish an inverter between it being smart and not smart. So in order to qualify for the rebate, you're essentially saying that the inverter meets specific criteria, and again, by and large, all the inverters being installed today qualify as a smart inverter. But you're essentially giving the utility sort of the right to curtail if indeed that is necessary in response to an event, a grid event. They needed to curtail export or backfeed onto the grid for some reason, they could do that remotely. And you sort of offer that right in exchange for the $250 per kilowatt. There's really a lot more to that, but those are the essential. Does that help? Okay.
Yeah, there's another online, we have actually two more online questions. The first one is ICEA looking at any solar panel recycling programs or regulation options given the increasing solar deployment? Jennifer, that sounds like one you might want to take.
So ISTC is partnering with ICEA on a solar panel recycling effort in the state to bring recyclers into the state and to develop a program. We're also partnering with IEC and a few other organizations. So yeah, I think to answer that question, ICEA is looking to do that. Their membership base strongly supports PV recycling and end of life, and we will be working over the next year to bring up a program and hopefully see some more in the state. Nancy wants to add to this.
And also ISTC held a seminar in September that you can view on our website about solar panel recycling if you want to see the latest on what's happening with those efforts. It's under our sustainability seminar series.
Okay, one more online question. Do electric co-ops have renewable energy and energy efficiency standards to meet, as do Ameren and ComEd?
What I can say about that is that some co-ops do offer incentives for things like geothermal, installing geothermal and EVs and so forth. But the big difference is that the co-ops and municipal utilities are regulated by a different entity. They're not investor owned, they're cooperative based, they're member owned, and so they do not contribute. There are not line charges or bill charges for their customers that support the adjustable block program, but they are currently eligible. The individuals in those other utilities are eligible to receive the SREC incentives currently, but no, they are not regulated in the same way or required to assess bill charges to support the adjustable block program.
Hi, I'm hearing about projects that are kind of stalled in the interconnectivity agreement stage, and is that something that we should be concerned about?
Yes, there is so much activity and so much interest that the queues really, I mean, Ameren and ComEd are having a hard time keeping up. I think if you're a developer of those projects that are sort of being delayed, of course it's concerning. But I think Ameren and ComEd are following the review time rules that are part of law, and they're doing their best to keep up. I would say, at least in Ameren territory, Ameren has done, in my opinion, a really great job of keeping up with the interest. And there will be projects that don't make the lottery deadline, which is actually January 30th. The adjustable block program opens January 30th instead of the 15th, by the way, if you didn't know. It's been delayed for a couple of weeks. But even if projects, the best advice I can give, if your project does not get its interconnection agreement in time in that 14-day window, let's say by February 13th, which is when the large project lottery will close, if you don't get your interconnection agreement by that time, all is not lost. right? This funding is going to go on. And my best advice I could give is to continue down the path, continue asking Ameren questions. Where is my interconnection agreement? How long do you think? And just politely continue to participate in the process, because beyond this initial surge in the lottery, it will be rank order, and the incentives will continue to come out, but you're going to have a rank order, a timestamp on your application, even if it goes in after the close of the adjustable block program. It doesn't mean the world is going to end. It just means that your SREC incentive will be a little lower. So yeah, there is concern that they're not going to be able to move through all of the interconnection applications that they have in enough time before the close of the lottery, but the close of the lottery doesn't mean that the incentives end. It just means that they're going to assess the initial lottery entrance. What pops out after that, we don't know yet. There could be a lot of the CSA projects that don't qualify in the end. So it's really hard to know at this point. And honestly, I don't think there's anything that you can do to speed up that process, frankly. We're in the same boat. All we can do is cross our fingers and hope that it comes out, and put in the most complete information that you can on the front end, so that they don't have to come back and ask questions for clarification. So it may not be a great answer, but
Sort of along those lines, but also thinking about the large scale picture, 20% renewable by 2025. How do the current interconnection agreements or the queues look, sort of outlook? How close are we going to get to that? I think you mentioned something about 7% short, or could you just clarify sort of the big picture and 25% renewable, but then maybe 50% in the future, and kind of speaks to what you mentioned at the beginning?
Oh, sure.
There's a lot of different.
Yeah, so there's a lot of conversation right now about what the technical fixes for some of those issues should look like. With respect, trying to think of a way to kind of summarize this. As far as the timeline goes, it's definitely a big ask to make it to 100% renewable energy, especially based on what year you want that. When you're thinking about it from a climate change perspective, getting to zero carbon by 2030 is a pretty common goal that people have set out. That's doable, but it'll probably require some legislative changes in the next session over 2019. But I am optimistic about that. I think that there are a good number of forces kind of converging on demanding that sort of an action in the near term, and not just from the environmental community, but also from other interests that have the ability to move forward with this stuff. Yeah.
So my question is really about the timeline on the adjustable block program. So I think that'd be for you. I just don't quite understand the different phases. I'm gonna hand this back to you. So the time you say this is the first phase, or block 1 and 2. Can you go through some of that?
Sure. It's a lot to keep track of. So what I'm referring to as phase 1 is really blocks 1 through 4. Blocks 1 through 3 already identified. We saw Ameren territory 22, 22, and 5. Right? Block 4 will be that extra 25% allocation if it's allocated to that specific category. And all those blocks is what I would call phase 1. The timeline, the opening of the adjustable block program is January 30th. Entries for a lottery, so basically large distributed generation and community solar, have to be in by February 13th. After that, there will be approximately a month to a month and a half of IPA coming back and saying, hey, can you clarify, like sort of fixing errors with the applications, and then the final lottery announcements. I expect sometime mid to late March announcements, sometime in that time frame. Phase 2, we'll begin working on, the long-term plan, the Future Energy Jobs Act included in it a revision of this first long-term plan, and that was planned for 2019. And because the first program was delayed, here we are already just launching and then revisiting. So that's going to happen this summer. And we'll see a draft of the next phase of this long-term plan with implementation and rollout of the next adjustable block program sometime in early 2020. So there will be a little bit of a gap to bridge, but it's not a gap where no information will be, published. There will be little bits of information as we go. But there will, from a company perspective, we're a little nervous about, okay, sell, build, and having a little bit of uncertainty of what the next round will look like. It's not if it will be there, it's what will it look like? What are the SREC values going to be again? So, does that help?
Follow-up. Is everything mentioned so far strictly relevant to community solar, and what about individual businesses applying for SRECs?
So all of those categories, the adjustable block program applies to all those categories. So anything equal to or less than 2 megawatts AC. So all the incentive conversations that we've been talking about, it doesn't matter who owns the system necessarily. It's linked to system size. So does that answer, you think that answers the question as written?
From what you're seeing in the queue right now, and we see such large demand for large-scale solar and community solar, do you see, and maybe this is Carrie question too, do you guys foresee in phase 2, with such little demand right now in DG, do you see that carving into some of that DG space, or do you think that the IPA will keep that space still available with, was it 54 megawatts each section?
I fully expect the allocations for what we might consider residential solar to they're not going to, in my opinion, they're not going to take away. They may not allocate the extra 25% to that category since it's a little bit behind, not necessarily behind, it's just not as, there's not just as much demand compared to C&I and community solar. It's hard to say exactly, but the Illinois Power Agency, we recognizes that this program needs to serve all categories, all individuals in the state as much as it can, and they want to leverage the monies to do that very thing. And they're not going to, show any sort of necessarily favoritism for one category or another. So I don't expect the allocations for residential to come down. Whether it increases or not is hard to say. It's just residential solar takes a lot more time. It just takes, because I've been on both sides of that, and it takes a lot. Though the cycle for large commercial is long, you have to sell, and have conversations across the kitchen table time and time again, often to get to one commercial, to get to the kilowatt size for one commercial development. So I'm not surprised that residential is a little bit behind, but there are companies in the state that are coming in all the time that are going to focus on residential. So I expect a lot of growth to happen in the next year on the residential side.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question online, and then we'll wrap up our talks for the day.
Okay, what training will be available for counties or municipalities that may have a solar farm constructed in their territory?
I can see Illinois Solar Energy Association, helping with that. I don't know that we have anything on the books yet, but we have done county training and presentations in the past, and I can see us serving that role in some capacity as well. So if you're one that is interested in that, please reach out at illinoissolar.org. You can email me directly. I can connect you to Leslie.
And Shannon, this is Laurel. Did you, I don't know if there's a link anywhere to the zoning guidance document that ICEA published a while back, but that might be helpful as well. And, you know, a lot of sort of a group of people, stakeholders and developers got together to put together sort of some guidance for municipal or county officials as they thought about zoning for these facilities. I know that's for larger, I think, ground mount systems, but that might be a helpful resource. But I would just offer my assistance as well if you need any particular resources or other things. I think my email address was at the end of my presentation.
Of course, yes, thank you. I had forgotten about that.
Okay, I want to thank all our speakers today for coming and such rich and lively topics from one end of the spectrum of solar to the opposite end. I just want to remind everyone that we will have these presentation videos available and archived on our website, as well as the PowerPoint slides if you're interested. And if you have any other questions, just please feel free to shoot me an email or any of our guest speakers here today. All right, thank you.